Morning, thank you for joining us. We're just getting our smoker going. We're going to do an inspection on this little split we took exactly 2 weeks ago and see how it's going. So first of all, I'm going to get my smoker going really nicely. It looks like those pine needles. Keep it puffing for a little bit before you stuff it full and just slowly add to it, otherwise it tends to go out. If you get hasty, like I still often do, stuff it full too quickly, it'll just go out, and you're better off starting again than puffing it for 10 minutes trying to get it going. But there we go, some good smoke. I'm going to blow some in the entrance just to have a calming effect on these bees. So a couple of puffs is all we need there, and then I'm going to rest it at the entrance so the returning foragers come back and get that smoke scent, which will help get them into a nice calm mood for our brood. Queen in there, and also keep an eye on the foundationless frames, make sure they're building on the comb guide. Let's see, 2 weeks in, what we have. So first of all, we're going to take off this. Don't forget to protect yourself, putting your bee veil on. I'm not going to wear my gloves because I'm an experienced beekeeper, but if you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves, look after yourself, make sure you're well protected until you're experienced and really are able to decide whether it's a glove moment or not. Sometimes I'll put on my gloves if the bees are aggressive, and other times I won't. Okay. Next, we're going to chisel off the inner cover with our Hive tool. This is a great tool for beekeeping, and we have that one. If you don't have one of these, super useful. There's all sorts of tools in the world, but this is my most preferred tool for beekeeping. So I'm going under here, and we hear that pop is the propolis that they've connected the inner cover on with. So it looks like the bees have been doing well in here, and they are busy. We've probably even got a little bit of comb starting here. Wow. These will probably be ready for a super. We're only 2 weeks in. This split was just 3 frames off the other hive. 1, 2, 3. And let's see what they've done on the other frames. Always when you pop the inner cover, if it's straight on the brood box with no excluder, have a look to see if the queen might be on there. You don't want to orphan her from the hive if you can at all help it. You want her to be able to walk back in. So just in case you have missed her, resting it up against the hive so those bees can walk in is good practice. So I'm just going to rest it there so all of those bees can slowly march their way into the hive like that. Great. Okay. I'm just going to pop a frame here. What's going on. Now, first of all, I'm going to have a look and choose which frame I want to get out first. The first one's always the tightest, and once we've got room to move sideways, we can then go ahead and move easily in the sideways direction. I can see here we already have a bit of room to move sideways. Using my Hive tool like this, I'm just allowing space there, and it also is cracking the propolis that's joining the end bars. So let's loosen that up nicely. Using a bit of smoke to clear any bees away from where you're working. And then I can slowly bring up one of these frames. And let's see what is on it. Okay. We've got a whole lot of brood, which is great. Fantastic. So we've still got brood 2 weeks later. And considering it's a 21-day cycle, if they were eggs from the last hive, from the queen in the last hive, they would still be in their capped phase, which you can see here. Might have to shake off a few of those bees, but first I'll just have a look for any queen cells in it, because you might dislodge her. So if you've got any questions, put it in the comments and we will get to answering those. Trace, amazing customer support rep here, will read those out. You'll recognise her voice if you've phoned up. Here we have a queen cell there, which is capped but has a little tiny piercing in it. Another one here. So they've been busy raising queen cells. Here's some here as well, which is a good sign because we want them to raise a new queen and get on their feet as a going little beehive. What I was hoping by now, 2 weeks in, we would have a queen already mated and hopefully putting some eggs down the bottom of the cell. So I'm going to look out for that just by holding it up in the light, looking down the cells for what looks like a tiny grain of rice. And as they progress, it'll look like a little crescent moon, and then into the larvae or grub stage. The shelf brackets are a very handy little frame rest. So what I'll do is I'll put them on the hive so that we can rest a frame there, and then you can do our breed inspection. So you can choose the spot where you put your shelf brackets, adjust the screws so they fit nice and tightly, and then you can drop a frame on like this. There we go. I find it best to rest them on the higher points. Take one out and then you've got room to move sideways. Okay, so if there's any questions, you can put it in the comments. Now, these were foundationless frames, which means all we gave them was a wooden frame and they built everything else. And I've become a big fan of foundationless frames since we don't need to put foundation sheets in anymore. And that was a great relief for me because I used to spend a lot of time waxing and wiring frames and reprocessing frames and swapping frames. Going foundationless has pros and cons, so I'll cover some of the pros and cons. And of course, with these frames you can put foundation in if you want to, whether it be plastic foundation or wax foundation. That's what comes with our kit, and the only difference is really this comb guide. So you put this comb guide in, which is just a piece of wood at the top, and that gives them a centre point to hang their comb from, and it works quite nicely most of the time. If you want to put foundation in, then if it's wax foundation, you'll be wiring up, getting nice foundation, which is very common in beekeeping. If you want to put plastic foundation, then it has the slots top and bottom for the plastic foundation as well. So it's up to you, there's no right or wrong, it's just what works for you and what you prefer. Now for me, I much prefer going foundationless because I don't need to spend all that time waxing and wiring, and there are other benefits as well. One is you're allowing the bees to draw the comb perfectly naturally themselves. Now let's see how they're going on the frames here. So all of these frames have been drawn by the bees in the last 2 weeks. And what you'll find is most of the time they will hang nicely from the comb guides, and occasionally you'll need to fix it up a little bit if they wander off. So look at that, that is a frame of honey. I can feel it's very heavy, and they have connected it nicely to the comb guide at the top. I'm just going to spin that around and show you because it's such a beautiful view there. I'll put it there for you. So they're bringing in a lot of honey at the moment. The spring has kicked in here in the southern hemisphere. Look at that, beautiful comb. They've done a great job, perfectly natural, exactly what they want to do inside the wooden frame. So we don't need to add harvesting in a new way directly from the hive rather than having to take the frames out and spin it. If we were to go and spin that frame of honey, it would fly apart because there's no wire reinforcement in it. So therefore with the flow hive, it lends itself nicely to foundationless frames because you do not need to have the reinforcement of either wires. Try and see what works for you. You can mix it up and do some foundations and some that are foundationless like this. Now another hidden benefit is all of the frames can generally stay with the hive. Instead of having to do your swap outs, take the old frames back to the work shed, reprocess them and take them back again. You can simply, when it comes time to cutting out some old comb, you would have cycled old comb towards the edge, right there in the field, and put the frame straight back in the middle. Of course, you're taking the piece you cut out away, keeping it away from bees, and either burning or burying that so you don't get any bees robbing any pathogens out of that wax you've cut out. But that saves this whole loop of taking the frame back to the work shed, processing it and bringing it back, and also saves potentially swapping pathogens from some of the frames in your shed back into the hive. So it's a little bit easier to isolate your frames to the hive than it is when you are taking frames for reprocessing and bringing them back again in the old foundation ways. Now, another benefit is all the wax in here has been drawn by the bees, excreted by their wax glands and made by the bees. We're not introducing any foreign wax. So when you introduce foreign wax, although I've done plenty of that conventionally for many years, and it's a reasonable thing to do, if you don't have to, then I say why do it? Because when you introduce wax that's come from other beehives, it could have a chemical load or a pathogen load to it. You know, it should be sterilized, but you don't know for sure. And it shouldn't contain any paraffin wax, but you don't know for sure. And you don't know how much chemical load has built up from insecticides and so on over time. So letting them draw it perfectly naturally, I think, is a great idea for that reason as well. And sometimes you'll find great examples where they've got cell sizes that change over the frame, and they're specifically drawing drone size cells because they want to, and they've sized their cells perfectly for the size of the bee, which is said to have a health benefit as well. Now, on the negative, so on the drawback, is they might wander off the comb, and it might be a bit more management in the hive to get them back in line. In a worst case scenario, they might go completely sideways. I've never had them do that. I've dumped plenty of swarms straight into a box of frames with no foundation. Might have to, over on the edges, tweak a little bit to get them going straight. So there's a little bit more work in the hive, but a lot foundationless. And as said, we don't need to spin this, so we don't need the wire, removing them from perhaps the edges of the bottom up to the top, and therefore it's common practice in conventional beekeeping to have that wire reinforcement. In terms of fixing it up, if you do get an issue where they have gone completely sideways, then you'll be using practices if you're doing a cutout. The sections of brood and rubber banding them in to the frame and giving them a go at connecting that nice and straight. That usually works pretty well. To do that, you grab rubber bands like this, and you've got your piece of brood comb from a cutout, or in this case, a cutout from bees that have gone sideways, and that will and tuck them out the front of the hive, and you should have your frame well connected. Freight. Haven't actually had to go sideways yet, but it is normal to have a little bit of comb on the edges that might need fixing up. So let's keep looking through the hive here. Another drawback is it's unusual practice. So if you're getting help from conventional beekeepers, you might get some very strong opinions saying that you have to use foundation or you'll be in big trouble. And that might be a bit of a drawback because you're then trying to work out which way you want to go and what you want to do. My father likes to put a couple of foundation sheets in the centre to give to guarantee they've got a nice straight start. I don't bother. I just go straight with all foundationless. That way I don't have to go down and buy any wax ever. Okay. If there's any questions, put it in the comments and we will get to answering those. So here's another frame that they've drawn completely foundationless. They've got a lot of honey in here now. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So what you'll notice is you've got wobbles in the frame. So a drawback of foundationless is you have to be a bit more careful, spend a bit more time pulling out the first frames before you can go sideways. You might choose a frame that you can understand why commercial beekeepers, they're in a hurry, why they would choose the foundation route, because you get straighter frames and you can pull up any frame quite quickly and away you go. As a backyard beekeeper, we don't really need to do that. We can spend the time of day in the hive like this, and it saves us a lot of time in the workshop. Look at this beautiful orange pollen on the frame. Pollen pants, there we go. Looks very cool on the fresh white wax that they've just excreted. Now, if there's another piece of management you need to learn, and you learn it quite quickly, is if the frame is heavy and you're tilting it over like this, you may find that the comb breaks out. See that? So with foundationless frames, you've got to be very careful until they've really connected it to the sidewall. So I'm just going to bend that back into position. There we go. So try not to tip it over. So that means at first, when it's delicate, you'll be looking at one side, which I'll show you how to do with this one. So you learn quite quickly about how to look at the frames. That one is another fresh, laden with honey one that we have to be very careful with. This one has been there a while, connected to the edges, so it's more solid. If we want to look at this side, we do it like this. If we want to look at the other side, we do it like that. And that way you don't ever have the frame sideways to gravity and allowing the comb to break out. Okay, we've got a few queen cells on that one. So let's keep here on the edge. It might need fixing up a little bit. So this is a great example. I'll just put a little bit more fuel in my smoker. Keep it going while you think of your questions.
Great seeds. Maybe I could just throw this one at your seeds while you're looking at these frames. A couple of people are just, but we do record it so on YouTube and Insta. So we're working on that. Ben's doing a great job. It was in the frame. And what if you don't use a comb guide, because we've got someone who went and bought some brood frames but they didn't come with a comb guide? Is it just something that we do?
Okay, if you're going foundationless without any foundation comb guide, which you can do if you don't have anything else, with some paddle pop sticks, and just glue them in the top there. And what they'll do, where's my example? They may draw it straight anyway because they're sensitive to the distances, but that will help. Putting that comb guide in will help. If you're drawing one frame between two other already drawn frames, you could skip the comb guide because they'll choose the center point anyway. So paddle pop sticks works great if you've got nothing else.
Great. And Sita, do you need to put a comb guide in the bottom of the frame, or is it just for the top?
Just the top only, because you want them to start up there then hang down. So another con or negative is if you're trying to draw foundationless frames, it's got to be in the bottom box. So if you add another box, for instance, then you want to put it underneath so the bees will hang down from that comb guide. If I just whack another box straight on top of this, all foundationless, you may find it gets quite messy because the bees might start at the bottom and build upwards. So there's another drawback. So you might like to either shift some of the frames up to give them the right idea of hanging down, or put the new box underneath the other one so they're hanging down. So there's a good tip if you're doing multi-story foundationless frames.
Right. And how often, Cedar Jackie's wondering, how often should you clean out the old wax from those frames?
Okay. How often should we
How often should you clean out the old wax on the float?
Cycling frames out, so you'll be moving them towards the edges when they don't have any brood in them. Then you can cut that wax out, take it away, and put the frame back in towards the centre. You can see us doing that a couple of weeks back on Facebook Live stream.
Right.
That'll get it going. Again. Any more questions? Put in the comments. We will do our best to answer. And also let us know whereabouts in the world you're tuning in from. We've got here springtime in the southern hemisphere. The bees are going crazy. This is 2 weeks from a split that we only took 3 frames out of another hive, and they've filled out all the frames already, and they are ready for a super. So it can happen really fast at some times of year, or it can be really slow. In the northern hemisphere it's fall, so people are starting to prepare their hives for a long winter ahead if they're in the colder regions.
That's amazing, isn't it, Steve? So just recapping that, because a few people are asking, that you moved 3 frames out of another hive and you put, is that right? And then you put 5 empty frames and they're what's filled up.
That's it. In the last 2 weeks they've made all that wax. They're very quick at making wax when you give them foundationless frames. I don't find it slows them down at all. And in fact, I find if you give them a choice between wax foundation and a foundationless frame, they will go for the foundationless frame first. So the bees like it, and it's a bit less work in the shed, but
Phil wants to know, so when you add an ideal brood box, will this affect the bees filling up the flow hive? And Phil's tuning in from Wagga, beautiful Wagga.
okay, in Wagga Wagga, adding an ideal box, yes. Any other boxes you add will slow down stores in the flow frames. Having said that, this time of year you could probably feel a decent way to go. I wouldn't add 2 deeps and then the flow frames on top, because you'll be waiting too long to get your flow frames filled. So either box like this, flow frame straight on top, or box like this, an ideal, and flow frame straight on top. Okay, so you have quite a long season ahead of you there in Wagga Wagga, so you could just put the flow frames on top, and if you want to add extra boxes later, you can then go and add your ideal later on. Okay. So let's have a look here, see what we've got. This is one of the original frames from the other hive that we took out. It's a naturally drawn frame as well. There's no wax or wire foundation. The bees have done a great job of that, and I'm looking around to see if we have a queen yet. It'd be great to find a young queen who would have probably just mated, but I'm not seeing. Oh, I heard a piping sound. That's exciting. Could be some communication. It's in the hive, I think. Piping or tooting notes. Could be one queen to the capped. Keep the questions coming in. Today we're looking at a split we took 2 weeks ago, and it's doing very well. Now springtime here, and it's ready for a super already. Here's a queen. Look at this. There she is, making a noise. There's our new. Put it close to me, see if you can hear her piping. Not quiet. She didn't do it. Give us a thumbs up if you. And what she's doing is trying to get other queens in the capped queen cells to call back so she can go and sting them and be the piping. Give us a thumbs up if you heard that little car horn noise. Tooting queen, here we go. Very exciting. So we're happy this split is away. They have a queen. Next, we're going to look back in a couple of weeks and see whether there is a lot of egg. Very cool. Go queen. So she would have gone on a mating flight. She'll do that, weather depending. Do a mating flight, she comes back, groans from the surrounding area. She's got a sperm load now to last her up to 6 years of laying eggs, sometimes up to a couple of thousand a day. It's such an incredible feat. And instead of lasting for 6 weeks like the worker bee, she'll last for up to 6 years. Even though she's got identical genetics to the worker longer.
So when you say she'll have mated with the drones, 30, could they have been drones from the hives here or even
from anywhere? So what happens each day, especially this time of year, is the drones will be flying from the hive to a drone congregation area, which is typically a sheltered place from the wind, but an open place. Football field would be a nice spot down in a valley, something like that, or a paddock. Where I live, I've got a nice valley where my I've witnessed them doing the mating flight a number of times, and it's quite exciting. You'll see a queen ripping around, drones from all sorts, and around they go, chasing the queen. They tend to clump together into a tight ball and spread apart again and roll in the air. It looks quite aquatic in a way, and I've been ducking my head as they rip around the valley. And what's happening is the first drone is mating with the queen. He gets his genitals ripped off, and that's the end of his life. The next one comes along, removes the genitals of the last drone, mates again. But when she returns to the hive, she will usually have the genitals of the last male bee, the drone, in her, and she will then go about laying eggs for many years to come, and she might live even 6 years of laying lots of eggs every day, up to a couple of thousand when she's in full swing. It's pretty amazing.
That is incredible. And does she die seeds because she's run out of eggs, or she's exhausted from having 50,000 million children?
Okay, it's usually a case of running out, I believe. So when she's failing, the queen will actually be superseded. So the hive will make that choice. She's underperforming, not laying enough eggs, or she's run out of sperm. She's only laying unfertilized eggs, which only turn into drones. The bees will actually ball her, and then that's the way it works. They try and keep themselves queen right. They don't always do it. Sometimes we need to intervene, but mostly they do raise a queen without one. You can hear that piping still. So this hive raised its own queen. We simply put frames in here from the other hive that had eggs down cells. The bees then turn some of them into for its entire gestation, and then it gets supersized and turned into a queen, and 16 days later it emerges. So we're 14 days in, and start of a queen cell when we move some of the frames across.
Oh, fantastic, because Em was asking on Facebook, if the split was only 2 weeks ago, how could they have raised a new queen in that time?
You're exactly right. So they had a head start with a queen cell, so they had at least a queen cup with young larvae in it in order for her to emerge within 16 days.
Amazing. And a few people can hear the sound seeds, which is great, because I know we're having a few sound issues, but they can hear the toot toot.
That's great. So yeah, I was surprised to see the queen already, but there she is, tooting away.
Might need they added a second brood box to the flow hive. They're fairly new beekeepers, or started last year. And just wondering, they added a second hive and they've been feeding it 1-to-1 sugar syrup. Just wondering when would be the best time to then check it again
So,
in Melbourne?
so they've got a single brood box, and then they've added a second brood box?
Yep, because last year they 1-to-1 sugar syrup to stimulate laying. Just wondering then when should they go back in and inspect it?
Okay, you can inspect as often as you like in that phase. And do lots of inspections, and the other time is a long cold winter. We generally don't inspect in those times either. We don't get a long cold winter here, so we can keep inspecting all year round, aside from that time when we have a so you can go ahead this time of year and inspect and see how they're going. Feeding them will stimulate them to expand. If you feed them a 1-to-1 syrup, which is called a thin syrup, so 1 part sugar, 1 part water, you dissolve that, let it cool, put it in whatever feeder you like, then you will be stimulating as if it's nectar, and the queen will start laying more, and so on. So that way you'll be getting a little bit of a jump on the season. Probably not necessary as the spring's rolling around here in Australia.
Great. And Jane wants to know, so when you pull out a frame, how do you know what honeycomb is safe to eat?
Okay, so you're looking for comb that has no brood in it. You can eat the bee bread, the pollen as well. It has a strong flavour, but generally people are pulling out the honey. So you will quickly get the idea of what honey looks like compared to brood. So here's an example of naturally drawn comb when they have started to wander off the comb guide and they're starting to bulge out. Now, we didn't catch this early enough, so it's very lopsided, if you like. Way out. So it's not really an issue as long as the next comb follows suit, which they have. But if you wanted to straighten that up, you can shake all the bees off and just cut that back and take that honey and wax away, and that would quickly fix up that section if you wanted to keep it nice and straight. Or you can just leave it, just bearing in mind you want to make sure when you pull it out you're not breaking a whole lot of comb and damaging bees against the next comb there. So with Foundationless beekeeping, advantages as well. So that one there, to answer your question, is all honey. Sometimes it can be a lovely thing to do to just cut a bit of comb out. With naturally drawn comb, that's another advantage, is you can easily cut comb out like you've seen, cutting a heart in here, taking that piece away for a cheese platter. You can only cut sections out. But this would be a great one to take a bit of comb for a cheese platter. So you might choose a piece up here. Look at that. Beautiful example of the natural comb and the bees building and filling the empty cells with nectar there. It's just mesmerising to stare in at the world of the bees. Enough there, because they've built on the comb guide. So if multiple queens are born, sometimes they will actually coexist in the hive for a little while till one ends up the reigning queen. Now, before some others, she'll usually make a tooting or piping noise. Other queens in their cells will call back, and that's probably what was going on here with our tooting noise. And a mother-daughter queen scenario, I've seen it many times, but usually there'll just be one reigning queen. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be wonderful if they could have 50 queens, and then you wouldn't have the queenless issue nearly as often. Okay. It's a beautiful thing.
what's the ambient temperature that you feel comfortable like doing this with your opening up your frames?
Okay, we can basically do it any time of year here because we're in the subtropics. It's a fairly warm climate. I'd steer away is pull apart your hive and leave uncapped brood to get cold, or they could get cold shock and damage the brood. 15 degrees C. When you're below that, you don't want it. Okay.
Now Damon's asking a question. Damon, I'm not quite sure, Seeds, you might of the Flow Super.
Yes, we do allow a little bit of wiggle room. Just make sure it's not big enough for the bees to escape. We can have a look at that on this hive over here to answer your question. I'll just put that frame, the window here. So here we are. The bees, after taking the split, have retracted a lot of the honey that we're starting to see. So it did slow down honey production in this hive. If we wanted to increase the speed again, we'll move. There's a lot of brood in there that will emerge soon and the numbers will pick up being springtime. And that's on purpose because you need some tolerance and some room to put your flow frames in. But if you've got large gaps, then what's probably happening is you've got overlapping frames. So if you've got frames that are overlapping in this way and crossing over each other, then you'll end up with larger gaps on the edge. So best, if you can, position your frames so that they form a nice flat window, and that way you shouldn't have gaps down here that are large enough to let a bee out. There should only be a couple of mil, and that way it's nicer when you open the window, no bees are escaping while you're trying to harvest honey on this side.
Right. Can you just clarify again, just a couple of people, did you say that you think the queen has done her mating flight?
She could be a virgin queen, or she could have already done her mating flight. It's only 2 weeks in, so she must have had a head start to be able in a queen cup when we took the split. Then she's just tooting away, and there's other queen cells in the hive. Making her piping noises and going to knock out some of the queen.
And fantastic. So when you're I guess this is what we've done here.
Okay. This one in the, so we moved it over a bit further and gave this new split a big boost. So it was an issue with the hive not getting enough bees, then you can use the placement to equalise. One tip when you're doing a split, there's lots of different ways to do a split. Some people just take the split and move it far away. Boost the weaker colony, put it in the flight path of the returning bees.
In space, do you think, or square feet of garden or flowering plants, do you need to support one hive if you're in a cold climate?
Okay, to support one hive in a cold climate for a Apis mellifera colony, you'll have to plant many acres of forage in order to boost honey production. Bees, a hive like this could visit up to 50 million flowers a day, and like to promote planting forage in your yard. You need regular forage, regular habitat in order to survive. And planting a whole lot of forage like we do, you see a lot of the native bee species coming in, and you might just be giving them stepping stones across the urban landscape, helping them in wild spaces together, helping some of those species on the brink of extinction. Forage and creating habitat is for the native bee, and you can change your honey crop by planting out acres and acres of forage for your bees to forage on. And what you plant will obviously be important. You might be filling in holes, planting them so you get an uptick on the value of your honey.
The bee, their cycle is about 3 to 4 weeks at a time. So do you ever have to go in and clean those bees out of the hive, or do they just sort it out themselves?
The undertakers. One of the many jobs in a worker bee's life is an undertaker. So if the bees die actually in the hive, you can actually witness this. If you go and have a look in the early morning, you'll see bees dragging out the dead, and they'll often be trying to deposit them as far away from the hive as they can. So a honeybee can carry in usually they can only carry it a metre or two at a time, and they'll try and deposit it.
Now Alicia's just picked up the brand new flow hives, levelling the hive.
But really off tilt down like this and across to a neighbouring frame because they're hanging it with gravity. So for that reason, when you're drawing naturally drawn comb in foundationless frames, this way, that's later for honey harvesting with the flow frames, but for the sideways direction, I have two, you can see the level bubble, you want that close enough to the middle, and in the front to back direction there's another one, and that's for honey harvest with flow frames.
Right, now just letting you all know too, if the sound is dropping out, and so it will all be in there, so sorry about that, but we're trying to get it sorted. So Cedar, if you're adding a second brood box to the super, like you've got your one brood box and a super, should the brood box go above the already existing brood box or below?
And you want to put it on top, then I would pull some of the frames up from below, so checkerboard it, and then they could draw then they're more likely to draw a nice straight foundationless frame in between other already straight frames. Or you could put a whole lot right underneath, and that they'll hang it from the comb guide down more readily than if you just put a box of empty foundationless frames on top. They might start at the bottom. To these frames, wax foundation, plastic foundation, do whatever you choose there, experiment and see what works for you.
These have knees and elbows.
Great question. Well, they definitely have leg joints, so I guess the bee's knees or not. Let us know what you think.
Do you mark your queens? And if so, what do you?
You can mark your queen quite easily. You need to grab the queen first, and then you use what's a Posca pen or a paint pen, or you can buy a special queen marking pen, and you're marking it on her thorax here. Doesn't seem to harm the bees, and it gives you a nice dot, helpful to find the queen next time you're in there. And there's a colour code for each year, so there's a little bit of science there, helping you study how long your queens last for if you're giving them a colour-coded mark.
Right, how do the bees make the wax?
And then other bees will grab that wax with their mandibles, mix it with a bit of special sauce and shape it and join it on to the cell structure. That some be 10,000 bees in this little box, or maybe more, and they structure. And bit by bit, lots of different bees working on the cells, they create this beautiful. In fact, you're getting it right across that 6mm size. And this just for honey stores. When bees are building comb just for honey stores, they often use a larger cell. That's why the flow frames have larger cells, millimetre cell. When they're doing drone brood, a lot bigger again.
I think people are thinking it's our Wi-Fi booster. We will put the replay on, so sorry if you're having a few issues with our internet. Oh, okay, if the light, so this is a question from 6 weeks, where do they go to die?
The job of a forager is collecting water. So people you often meet say, oh, I found these bees beside my pond and they look like they were dying and they need shaggy. they're on their last flight. They may not make it back to the hive. So that's where you often see them and take them as far away as they can. And that's the job of the undertaker.
The bee undertaker. I wonder if they have a little hearse or something.
They have these little tiny hearses,
Yeah.
drive around.
Oh, Cedar, why did...
Honey over the ages has been revered by so many cultures, and one of them was the Egyptians. Didn't have, I guess, some of the luxuries we have today. Then honey would stand out as a really prime, special, both food source, both medicinal. So for that reason, it got used by the Egyptians in the tombs. So alongside their gold, there'd be pots of honey as they wrapped up their mummies in the tombs, and they found honey 3,000, but still edible. The person who's tasting that after 3,000 years, but incredible. That honey, if the moisture content is kept low, if the lid's sealed so excessive moisture can't build up in it, it will last a very long time in the jar.
Great. Now, we're getting some great bee questions, Lucy, but they could see bees busy working in the flow super.
Keep working, and bees that well until they're woken, and off they go again working. View, you get to see some bees sleeping sometimes. If you give them a little tap, they'll start to is having a look at bees sleeping in that cross-section view of the flow frames.
Cedar, you're smoking them, but do you need to smoke them, or are there any alternatives?
Okay, there are some alternatives out there. Some people use like a sugar spray. There's emerging technology with vape. There's also instances where you don't need smoke. Let's say if you're catching a swarm, you don't generally need any smoke. Sometimes when the colony is very small, I won't use any smoke. But generally, smoke is a great tool for having a nice calming effect on the bees, and also moving bees out of the way. Like if I want to move these frames across to put the next frame in, a little bit of smoke will get them out of the way so they don't get squashed as I insert that last frame.
Right, now Seeds, how many times have you been stung?
Many times. I get a bit complacent. You can see I'm not wearing gloves. But if these bees were particularly stinging, I would put my gloves on. If you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves, and that way you'll limit a gentle experience and make sure you are looking after yourself.
Right, so how do you know when to add the next box?
Okay, the time to add the next box is when you see here, you can see all the frames being used by the bees, and there's lots of bees in the box. This hive is ready for another box, so we can go ahead and add the flow super.
Right, now Martin's wondering, he said the inclination of the hive should be towards the entrance of the hive to help the bees maintain and clean the hive more easily. He's noticed that our hives... Is it like that?
Yes, we do a lot of unconventional things as flow hive beekeepers. We've invented a completely new from the entrance. So for that reason, we slope the hive to help the honey flow out that way, and confusion with new beekeepers. New beekeepers commonly are used to beekeeping with just a flat bottom board and sloping it that way, so any driving rain that goes in can flow. May go in the entrance, but to mitigate any issues caused by that, we have a sloped landing board, and then we have a screen bottom board, so any water that goes in won't pool in the hive, it'll pool in the tray below, which you can empty out. We've chosen to slope it the other way, but we...
Right, now Kim's done a split, but the colony is small. There's a new queen and larvae with returning foragers. Now Kim's question, are you late?
The original hive with the split.
Original.
Yes, mind you are then perhaps sharing come from the other, so any pathogens that one has, the other's likely to have too. So you can go ahead and swap them without causing any more pathogen risk, and that will then the returning foragers will go to the weaker one. So that'd be a good equalisation technique. Okay, keep the questions coming in. We've got time for a few. Okay, so dies. So the queen stops laying and the hive dies out, or perhaps you got an issue. Please check for pathogens before you repopulate that hive. Equipment to make sure you're not bringing the pathogens. Irradiation is possible. You can send old equipment for irradiation. Kill pathogens such as AFB or EFB, which are AFB is probably the worst one you can get, which or irradiate your equipment in order to kill the AFB spores. So when you see a of AFB, which if you get the cells in the right sunlight, if there was AFB in there, along the cell wall, showing that AFB might have been present in that hive. If you see that, I wouldn't recommend using any of that equipment again, or at least you should irradiate it. If everything looks clear and perhaps the hive just went queenless and died out, then it's still good practice to clean all the wax off and sterilise the inside of your boxes, which you can do with a blowtorch. Once you clean the wax off, you can run the flame around it. Some countries use bleach for
about the mating flight, and Greg wants to know, how can you same or different?
So very different. A mating flight just has this big, and when it's spread out and kind of roll in the air fast. A swarm will be thousands and thousands of bees, and they do get going fast once they're on their way to their chosen place for it to move into, but generally you get a bees ripping around could be a mating flight.
Great. Caesar, is it more important to place your hive in a spot with full from wind and rain? So the sun or the shade?
Oh, so there's always full shade. I'll always go full sun because that limits things like chalk brood from building up in your hive. Hive into the sunshine to help reduce that fungal load. And if it's too much, it's more choosing a nice calm day to do your brood inspections. The bees are pretty good when it comes to wind, dealing with sun. As home beekeepers, choices of where to put the hive will largely be around the flight path. So you don't want to put your flight path where it's going to bother you without bothering anyone or accidentally landing in their hair and so on. Another consideration is you don't want to point it towards a light that's on.
Martin, your question, he just was asking about marking the queens, but no, cedar doesn't mark as queens, Martin, just so you know, but you can, and there's different colours for different years.
The queen, and it's a fun thing to do so you can track how long your queens last for by using the queen colour code.
Great. To the area.
If you're in a really dry area and you are worried there's no water, showed you how to do that over here. This simple way to make a feeder is some, and the bees can now go and collect water from there. That topped up, and you would have a nice place for them to forage. They do like drown in it. Okay. Got time for a couple more questions as we put this hive back together.
Yeah. What's the longest you would leave your hive open?
Would be, let me see. For the bees, but sometimes they can get a bit agitated, so you're really just tuning in with the bees and deciding when it's time to close them up. If it was a cold windy day, we wouldn't have them open so long, or if it was raining, that's not a good time to have them open either. So a couple of factors there.
Right. Now what makes the difference, see, to this one's we get asked a lot, between the dark honeycomb and like as the one that we can see right on that hive now, it's obviously fresh honeycomb.
Yep.
What makes it go black?
What makes it go black? Characteristics in the honey, they can get darker over time. So we have it around here in the winter time, and what happens if the honey's in the hive for a long time, it can get darker and darker. And sometimes we get honey that you cannot even see through, and it's black, and that's really dependent on the nectar source that it originates from. So some honeys or some nectar sources will produce very light honey, and some very dark honey, and some in between, some more yellow, some more red, and so on. So it really depends on the flowering source. Okay, so now this hive to lay, so we're actually going to take away this frame, and it's not quite capped, but we can enjoy that still on a cheese platter. Back in here that the bees can then draw their wax from. So that's a fresh one there, down in between those two frames, and that way they will have that honey coming in. There's not really anywhere for the new queen to lay, and I don't want them to swarm before they've gotten started. So what I will do is take away a frame of honey and put in a blank one, which we've done there, and then put the hive back together, keeping all of the brood that we still have central and the honey on the edges.
Yes.
Absolutely. Try and see what works for you. Our frames are built to accommodate wax and wire foundation or plastic foundation. There's a comb strip side for the wire, and you can go ahead and wire that up and put your wax in and so on. If you want to do that, see what works for you. That will more likely is perhaps your wax has bowed a bit, and then you've got wobbly frames. Perhaps you've got plastic foundation and decided straight frames, but you'll still find issues with foundation as well that will need fixing up. But it generally does work to build nice. Well, another reason why we don't need to use foundation with the flow hive is these, because we can harvest with the flow frames directly from the hive, and we don't need the centrifuge and all the paraphernalia you once needed to do your honey harvesting. Of course, you could crush and strain as well. That's a basic method. If you wanted to take this frame out, you'd wait till it's capped and just crush and strain that honey, obviously getting the bees off first. Crush and strain it, and then you've got wax to play with and some honey. That's messy but fun to do for a few times, and that's another method of harvesting. You can also use these edge frames for beautiful honeycomb for your cheap.
Great. Cedar, Andrew's he's just struggling to identify his queen, a new novice beekeeper. So just wondering, Andrew wants to do a walk-away split soon. No matter which hive has the queen?
No, it doesn't matter which hive has the queen. Perhaps do an even split in this case, so you take half of the frames out. Make sure there's eggs in both colonies, and the one without the queen will typically raise a queen and get going in about 16 days or a little bit more.
Great. Now it looks like maybe we've lost our sound on TikTok, so you won't even hear me saying this, but hopefully on Facebook and Insta and YouTube, and we